All right, getting ready for your Class 11 Commerce exam. Perfect. We're about to do a super quick but super effective revision on one of the most important tools in all of microeconomics, the production possibility curve. Let's make sure you've got this nailed down.
So let's start at the very beginning. The entire field of economics, really it all boils down to one fundamental problem. It's something that every single economy, and honestly every one of us, has to deal with every single day.
And that problem is scarcity. Here's the deal. We've only got so many resources. Things like land, labor, and capital. They're limited. But our wants for cool stuff and services are pretty much endless. And that mismatch, that's what forces us to make choices.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with why we have to choose. Then we'll get into visualizing those choices with the PPC. We'll build one from scratch, figure out what its shape really means, and finally, we'll get into the calculations you'll definitely need for your exam. Okay, let's jump right in.
Because of this whole scarcity thing, it doesn't matter what kind of society you're in. Every single one has to answer three basic but absolutely critical questions.
First up, what are we actually going to make with our limited resources? Should we focus on consumer goods like cars and phones, or defense goods like tanks? Second, how are we going to produce it? Are we going to use a ton of workers or invest in a lot of fancy machines? And third, for whom are we making all this stuff? Is it for everyone or just certain groups? These are the central problems, and economists needed a way to visualize these tough trade-offs.
And that's where our main tool comes into play. Enter the production possibility curve, or as you'll often see it, the PPC.
Think of the PPC as a kind of menu for an entire economy. It shows all the different combinations of two things it can produce, but only if it's using all of its resources as efficiently as humanly possible. It's basically the economy's production limit.
Now, to keep this model nice and simple so we can actually analyze it, we have to make four key assumptions. And you'll want to remember these. We assume that resources are fixed, technology isn't changing, we're only making two goods just to keep the graph simple, and that every resource is being used fully and efficiently.
Okay, let's get practical. How do you actually build one of these things? Let's see how you can take some raw data, just like you might see in an exam, and turn it into a PPC diagram.
You'll almost always start with a table or a schedule like this one. It lays out the trade-offs really clearly. So look at combination A. If we throw everything we have at making machines, we can produce 15,000 of them, but that means 0 wheat. Now, if we decide we want some wheat, say 1 lakh quintals like in combo B, we have to give something up. In this case, we lose 1,000 machines.
So, you take those points from the table, plot them on a graph, and connect the dots, and voila, you get the production possibility curve. Every single point on that curve, A, B, C, D, represents a maximum fully efficient combination of wheat and machines this economy can possibly churn out.
Now, the shape of this curve is not random at all. It tells us a really powerful story about how the economy works. So let's break down exactly what that shape is telling us.
First thing you'll notice is that it slopes downward from left to right. Why? Well, it's just a visual representation of scarcity and trade-offs. Since we're using all our resources, the only way to get more wheat is to shift some resources away from making machines. You just can't have more of everything.
And the second thing, and this is super important, is that it's bowed outwards. The technical term is concave to the origin. This particular shape is a huge deal because it shows us a concept called increasing marginal opportunity cost. What that means, in simple terms, is that the more you want of something, the more of the other thing you have to give up for each new unit. It gets more and more expensive. We'll see exactly why in just a second.
So what about the points that aren't right on the curve? Well, any point inside the curve means we're being inefficient. Maybe we have unemployment or factories aren't running at full tilt. We could be doing better. Points on the curve are efficient. That's the sweet spot. And any point outside the curve, that's just impossible right now with the resources and tech we have.
This leads us perfectly to the next big idea, understanding the real cost of our choices. See, in economics, it's not about money, it's about what you had to give up. And this is where the exam calculations come in.
The real cost of anything is its opportunity cost. It's just a fancy way of saying it's the value of the next best thing you had to sacrifice to get what you wanted. So, if you choose to produce 1 more ton of wheat, the opportunity cost is whatever number of machines you couldn't make as a result.
Okay, let's zoom in and get even more specific with marginal opportunity cost, or MOC. This is what measures the opportunity cost at each individual step. It's the rate of sacrifice for producing just 1 more unit of something. And guess what? This concept is the exact reason the PPC has that bowed-out concave shape.
Let's walk through this classic guns and bread example. To get the very first gun, when we move from A to B, we only have to give up 2 units of bread. Not so bad. But look what happens later. To get that fifth and final gun, moving from E to F, we have to give up a massive 10 units of bread. See how the MOC keeps going up? That's because resources aren't perfect substitutes. The people and factories best at making bread are the last ones you move over to making guns, so you lose a ton of bread for just one more gun. That is increasing MOC, and that is why the PPC is concave.
So here's a super simple way to keep them straight for your exam. MOC is marginal. It's all about the cost of that very next unit. Opportunity cost is the bigger picture, the total alternative that you gave up. You can think of MOC as the slope of the PPC changing at every single point.
So what's the big takeaway here? The PPC is this amazing visual snapshot of an economy's potential, and it's all built on scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. As we wrap this up, really think about the question on the screen. Discovering new oil is like getting more resources. What would that do to the entire curve? If you can answer questions like that, you're in great shape. Good luck with your revision.